I will be introducing our speaker for today. So from our icebreaker, we got to know that Mr. Innocent is a man that is absolutely surrounded by women. But beyond that, we would get to know that he's a champion for women, an absolute supporter, and a rightful ally for women around the world. So just to dig deeper into who Mr. Innocent Chukwuma is. Mr. Innocent Chukwuma recently served as the director for Ford Foundation's office in West Africa. From Lagos, he oversaw all grant making in the region, supporting efforts to ensure that all people have equal access to economic and social opportunities. In managing this work, he has addressed issues of democratic and accountable government, freedom of expression, and sexuality and reproductive health and rights. Mr. Innocent is a globally renowned advocate for human rights and good governance. Before joining the foundation in 2013, he founded and led the CLEAN Foundation to promote public safety, security, and accessible justice in West Africa. CLEAN was the first African non-governmental organization to receive the prestigious MacArthur Foundation Award for creative and effective institutions. In addition, Mr. Innocent has led various posts within the Civil Liberties Organization, one of Nigeria's first human rights organizations. He was also the chair of the Altus Global Alliance, a global network of non-profits. Mr. Innocent is the recipient of numerous honors, including the Reebok International Human Rights Award. He served as a visiting lecturer at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government, where he designed and taught a course on the management of non-profits in the Global South. He holds a master's degree in criminal justice from the University of Leicester and a bachelor's degree in religion from the University of Nigeria. On a more personal note, Mr. Innocent is married to Josephine Chukwuma, a gender advocate and activist who is the founder of Project Alert, which is focused on domestic violence and legal support for women. Their union has been blessed with 4 daughters. Innocent is a champion for women and a feminist. Throughout his long and illustrious career, he has mentored, coached women, and supported women to rise to their highest potential. He serves as a role model for none other than our co-founder, Ndidi Muneli. Please join me to welcome Mr. Innocent.
Thank you so much, Aisha, for those kind words. I hope I will be able to live up to them in this short presentation. And let me start once again by saying congratulations to our female colleagues and to all of us that support them in the amazing work they do, both in Sahel Consulting and in the wider communities where they live. I was approached by Ndidi to make this presentation. Initially, I was going to ask her, why me, why not my partner, Josephine, who is better known for the subject matter. But now I quickly realized that men are also very important in promoting women leadership in the workplace. And I actually had an early example of that right back in my university days when I was a member of Women in Nigeria, which was an association of men and women who believe in women liberation. And that was long before the UN and other international bodies started recognizing and creating programs about male involvement in championing advancement of women. So I didn't hesitate to ask why am I here and what qualifies me to be here, in addition to what Aisha has already shared, that I'm a father of girls. It's 3 girls, and their mother makes them 4, who make me get up every morning happy to do whatever I'm doing to contribute my quota to advancing women's rights. I would like to share my screen because I have a few slides I want to show you. Is everybody seeing this slide?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, so as you were told, the title of this year's International Women's Day is Women in Leadership, Achieving an Equal Future in a COVID-19 World. And that's also the title of my presentation. It is divided into 5 sections. We'll begin with a short history, very brief outline of International Women's Day for the benefit of those of us who have not read up about it or participated in any discussion on International Women's Day. We'll quickly advance to outlining the significance of setting aside a day like this to celebrate women of the world, and quickly move on to the theme of this year's edition and why it's important. The first section will deal with COVID-19 pandemic and the role of women. And finally, we close it with what can we do as individuals, as a collective, in our workplace, in our homes, to ensure that women have all the support they need to advance in leadership, especially at this period of COVID-19, when all of us, but particularly women, are facing existential challenges. So if you permit me, I'll go to the first slide. I have no intention of reading it, just to outline important dates in history that contributed in making what is today celebrated around the world. For a lot of people who, when they hear about International Women's Day, what comes to their mind is actually, it's the feminists and their feminist organizing, without knowing that the whole idea of setting aside a day to celebrate women actually started with the labor movement. It was the working women and men who realized that women are suffering in the workplace. Women are not getting enough jobs. When they get jobs, they are not paid equally as their male counterpart. That on February 28, 1909, the American Socialist Party organized a day to honor the garment workers in New York who were on strike. You would think since it started in America, America will be today the dominant player in this whole idea of not just celebrating, but also advancing women. But that is actually not the case in history, because quickly it moved to Europe. And the lady you are seeing the picture there, Clara Zetkin, a German feminist, was the first to push for a day to be set aside as a holiday in honor of women in 1910. And then in 1911, it was celebrated in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. And from there, it moved over around the world, particularly in Russia. A lot of people, again, when we talk about the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia, which happened in 1917, even the name itself, calling it Bolshevik, is a misnomer. It would have been called a women revolution because it was actually a women-led revolution. The Bolshevik Party, the revolutionary party in Russia or Soviet Union at the time, had actually designated May 1 as the day to storm the palace of the Tsar and sack him. But women first marched on March 8 because they were protesting against how they are treated in the workplace. And as a result of that march, which began on March 8, the Tsar fled Russia and quickened the revolution. But today, it's called a Bolshevik revolution and not a women revolution. And as you very well know, there are so many important achievements in human history that have been wrongly ascribed to men or to organizations, whereas it's actually women that started them. So this is one of them. So from that Bolshevik day, Lenin, who was the first president, as we call it today, in Soviet Union, made it a holy day. And over the coming 2 to 3 decades, it became a prominent holiday in mostly communist and socialist parties, which was probably why America was not too much in a haste to embrace it and designate it as a public holiday, because the communist and socialist countries did it first. And if you remember, at that time, the world was divided between the East and the West led by the US and the East led by the Soviet Union. But it was in 1967 that the UN started celebrating March 8 as International Women's Day, the way we know it today. At the last count, over 25 countries in the world have it as holidays, including 6 in Africa, Burkina Faso, Guinea-Bissau, Madagascar, Uganda, and Zambia. Unfortunately, Nigeria is yet to designate March 8 as a public holiday, although it's celebrated across the country, but it's not yet a public holiday. So we'll move to the next. When you read the story about International Women's Day, you will think it's an exclusive preserve of what countries in the West and other parts of the world do. And you begin to wonder, did Africa play a role? Did Nigerians contribute in any way to do that? So I just included this slide to essentially underscore that while all these currents were going on around the world, women organizing to throw away oppressive system, women organizing to improve their laws, Nigerians didn't go to sleep, even though we were under a colonial government. And the people you see in this picture, I bet you recognize about 3 of them. You will recognize Funmilayo Oransom Kuti, who is very well known as one of those that championed the anti-colonial struggle and is reputed to be the first woman to drive a car in Nigeria. You will also read about the exploit of Margaret Ekpo, who was again one of the anti-colonialists and played prominent role in the politics of both independence and post-independence. And of course, in the North, you will hear about Gambo Sawaba, who played a similar role in the northern part of the country. But I wanted to use this slide to highlight one figure that has not been given her due, because actually what she started was the foundation of women's movement, women's pride, and in fact, the anti-colonial struggle in Nigeria, and that's Madam Wanyerowa. This is an illiterate woman. She didn't go to school. This was a widow, but was a bundle of courage. And what happened for men to pay? And then the following year, they began a census, which is usually the precursor of introduction of tax, to know the number of taxable adults to impose taxes on. So they send the district officers, or the warrant chief, as we call them in the South, is to go across the home and count the number of women, count the number of, if they have if they have animals that they trade in, count them all in a bid to determining the size of tax to impose on them. And this particular woman, realizing what this thing was all about, and also that in Igbo society, women don't pay tax, she quickly asked the person who came to do this census, I'm a widow and you come to count people in my house and my livelihood pursuit. Did you also count that of your mother? Because I know your mother was a widow at the time. The person took offense and wanted to beat her. She fled to the market square to rouse other women about what she was facing. And there she met other women discussing the same issues, because the census was being conducted across the then Eastern region, made up of different ethnic groups. And that was how they rallied around themselves and started that rebellion, which is wrongly christened or called Aba Women's Riot of 1929. In the end, about 25,000 women participated in that protest, and 51 of them, unfortunately, were killed. And that particular incident was the first milestone in the anti-colonial struggle. Because if you look at all the independent struggle leaders that we have, you started hearing about them in the 30s, whether it's Zeke that came back, Awolowo, and all of that. But this happened in 1929 and was instigated by a widow, an illiterate woman at that. And that brought a lot of changes, because also ensured that women were not taxed, and the high-handed approach the colonial authorities were using at the time were sort of reduced. And the lesson from that for me is that you don't need to be very educated, you don't need to be very rich. If a poor illiterate widow could start it in the backwaters of a place called Oloko in today's Abia State, any one of us can lead a struggle. So I just wanted to introduce this slide to highlight that important, because all you hear is about women's riot of 1929, as if there was nobody that actually instigated it that led to all the story that we read about today. So we go to the significance of today being set aside as International Women's Day. As we highlighted earlier, I think Aisha mentioned it, and those that gave the names of the most important women in their life, is to celebrate womanhood. Why is it important to celebrate womanhood? Because we live in a patriarchal societies. We live in societies where every day women are denigrated, every day women are de-emphasized, every day women are meant to feel as if they are the inferior, as if they are inferior beings. Whereas among several other important roles that women play in our society, the whole issue of the bloodline or lifeline of mankind, the whole issue that many important struggles in human history have been led by women and continue to be led by women today, it's important to celebrate. So wherever you are in this particular event, hold yourself high. Say, I am so glad I'm a woman. It's not an easy thing to be alive today and thriving in spite of all that society, patriarchal society in particular, has thrown on you. So if there is one important reason to celebrate or designate a day like this, is to celebrate women. The next one is to recognize the achievement of women across sectors. Earlier, I said a number of important victories, a number of important struggles have been led by women and are not ascribed to them. Today, we talk about mansplaining. Mansplaining has its roots in actually choosing struggles and victories that are won by women and looking for a man, to ascribe it to. That's how the whole thing is. So a day aside to say this person merits being celebrated across sectors, across the divide, a day like this helps us to, showcase it. And the other one is also to make people aware about discrimination against women in our societies. Make people to recognize that women's rights are important. Those of us who read and watch Chimamanda's videos and book will recognize one thing she wrote in that particular book, Feminist Manifesto, where she went to a supermarket with a friend of hers who happened to be a man. And as they were driving out of the supermarket, she took money and gave to the security guy who was manning the gate. And guess what happened? The security guy said, "Thank you, sir," as if it was the male who was driving the car that gave him the money. Whereas it was, these are the little things we all tolerate in our everyday life, in our societies. You go into a restaurant to place order with a relative, a girlfriend, a sister, and they will pay only attention to you. And ignore the person. Don't stand up, don't sit back for that. You need to really step up for women. If there's anything to emphasize in this particular discussion today, is the importance of the male folks. And in Sahel Consulting, among your 15 staff, you have 9 men and 6 women. It's imperative on the male folks to stand up for the women within your midst. Don't wait for them to say, I don't like this and all that. It's like being doubly victimized. It's important for us to step up for them. And then along that line also is to call for action for acceleration in women's equality, which is what today's International Women's Day celebration is all about. I'll take you to the next slide. The theme of this year's, as we have highlighted, is essentially about reflecting on how women can be made equal partners in decision making. And this is not coming out of nowhere. It's out of the realization that in today's world, especially within policy-making circles, within legislatures, within governance, women are left terribly behind. Women are terribly behind in our societies. And we are told that only 3 countries in today's world have 50% of women in their parliament. The only country in Africa that qualifies for this is actually Rwanda. Senegal is upcoming. They have about 43% representation of women in their parliament. So when we have this kind of a disparity, we can't help but go through extra mile to ensure that women are better represented. We are also told that only 22 nations in the world today have women as head of states, and 119 others, including Nigeria and many other countries in West Africa, with the possible exception of Liberia, have never had women leaders. So this whole inequality needs to be addressed. And that's what the United Nations want all of us today in our individual, at our individual level, as a collective, as an organization, wants us to focus to address. And it's not just within government, policymakers, even within our homes and our workplaces, we are challenged to do something about it. And then we come to the COVID-19 and the role of women. We have seen it, studies have shown that countries led by women have performed remarkably well in responding to the crisis. If you read the study, we are informed that New Zealand, Germany, and other countries, Denmark, that women are leading today, they are among the first to get a handle of COVID-19, which means if given more leadership opportunities, that they can perform well. If you're also looking at the response to COVID-19 itself as frontline workers, because women traditionally have been involved in caregiving role. They are the ones that are manning the hospitals as nurses, as doctors, as scientists, and also caregivers. However, when it comes to rewarding them for this, they are left terribly behind. And we are told that in terms of payment, women make 11% less than their male counterparts are paid globally. And also today, nearly 47 million women have been forced into poverty as a result of COVID-19. And the World Economic Forum also tells us that even though women make up 70% of the workforce within the health sector, only 24.7 or approximately 25% of health ministers are female across the world. This is the reality of today for which we are called upon to intervene. And the question is, what can we do? And we quickly look at the Nigerian own situation. If you look at all that has been written in the newspapers and studies, you will see some positive that women have been able to take advantage of within this COVID-19 season. The whole idea of working remotely, because if you look at what hinders women from taking up jobs, especially those in marital or permanent relationship, the whole idea of relocating from where you are with your spouses or family to where the job is available has been somewhatly minimized for those in formal work, although we have to remind ourselves that about 90% of Nigerian workforce fall within the informal sector, where continuity of job is precarious. But for those who are in the formal sector, and especially in organizations where remote working is allowed, women have taken advantage of it to grow in the workplace. The same thing with flexible working hours. As women who have young children, whole idea of leaving them at home and going to work, or leaving them in the care of caregivers that you have no control of, has actually made many women workers to withdraw from work to attend to them. But now with remote working and flexible working hours that COVID-19 has guaranteed, people are able to juggle, even though it's at a serious disadvantage, but they are able to plan the time that they can devote to work and plan that they can devote to caring their family. When I was informed, I approved the request of colleagues who said they work better in the night when their kids have gone to bed, and therefore whatever assignment that they are given, they would like to be allowed to do them in the evening or in the night. And we approved it, and it helped them to meet up with their expectations at the workplace without any undue challenges. But then, in terms of challenge, it's actually abounds. Studies that have been done, especially at the early phase of COVID-19 in Nigeria between March and April, when total lockdown was enforced, showed that violence against women increased between 149% to 297%. And you may ask, what is the correlation between staying at home and violence against women? The simple answer is that when you are living in an abusive environment, getting up in the morning to go to work is actually a relief, which means for the 8 or 9 hours you will be away, you will not be in close proximity with your abuser. But when you work at home, you wake up and you go to bed and you are with the abuser, it increases violence against women, which again impacts on women's productivity in the workplace. COVID-19 also has increased losing of job by women because of their disproportionate involvement in the informal sector. If you disaggregate employment within the informal sector, you will see that you have more of women than men. And also the whole issue about juggling the burden of work, of homework, which women escaped with all the right to work struggles that were achieved in the 19th and 20th century. COVID-19 lockdown has forced women to go back to work at home, which reminds them of what their mothers and grandmothers went through, having to juggle. And many of them have found themselves quitting the job. And another challenge they have faced is relative unconducive working environment. For those of us who are working from home, if I ask us to show our videos now and the background of where we work, you find out that the male folks are more likely to work in their studies or home offices, which have been arranged before COVID, whereas women work from their dining or the sitting room where everybody moving around the house comes into play. That kind of environment is very unconducive for high level of productivity. And if you see some of the videos that have gone viral in the world about partners and kids jumping across, but increasingly people and workplaces have come to accept that that is part of working from home. And finally, it's increased risk of contacting COVID-19 because women are caregivers. When people around them fall sick, they are the ones that take care of them and ultimately catch the disease. Whereas if a woman brings the disease home, the male folk are more likely to find a way of escaping it. But if it is the men or the children that have it, you will see that it's only in extreme cases that the woman will agree to leave the house for them to be quarantined. So all these challenges make it difficult for women to thrive in the workplace. And finally is, what can we do? What can we do as an organization? What can we do as a country? Where women need greater support and social protection, particularly women workers. We need to find a way of getting government to pay for the time, the precarity of workplace that women are facing today. Around the world, you have all kinds of social protection program, cash transfer, food transfer, and paying for unpaid time that we, but in Nigeria here, it is not the case. We also need to increase our collective action towards reversal of long-standing inequalities against women. This is where I want to be a little particular and cite personal examples that I have tried in my workplace, which can also in other home, which can also be tried here. In many working environments, the leader actually what the law says. But if we want to make our workplace conducive for women, we don't have to wait for those who are abused to step up to complain, for those who feel qualified to rise up and ask for them, because immediately they do that, in many places that they are branded. in a work environment like Sahel Capital, Sahel Consulting, we should aim towards the place where, since you have more men than women, if you see positions where your female colleagues are more qualified, or the organization is looking for who will fit it, be bold enough to recommend those qualified women for it. Don't wait for them to say, I'm qualified for this, because it puts them on the defensive. If we are champions, this is what champions are required to do. Even though it might sometimes lead you to losing whatever promotion or acknowledgement you think you deserve. But if you believe that a situation where half of our population are not getting their equal due in the workplace, we need to participate in this meeting without our female folks if it has no financial implication. But if for any reason, whatever we decide will require us to make contribution, that the nature of my family income is such that I have joint account with my wife, and having her participate in that meeting would enable her to agree that we make the contribution. So their initial reaction was to say, okay, let's make exception for your wife to participate because of your family income. But then another person said, this is the last wife to be married in the home. If we allow her to be participating in the meeting and leave the others, how would they see us? That every one of them should be allowed to participate in that meeting. And that was how all our wives started participating in our annual meeting at home, which has enriched the quality of a decision we made and the implementation. Because in all the organizations, they can bear me witness, all the organizations that I belong of Southeast origin, it's actually only the ones led by women that are doing what they set out to do. Wherever you have only men, we spend 3/4 of the time bantering around and reconvening next time and never getting
I have a question. Hi, Innocent. Welcome. We're so glad to have you. There's a very fine line, Innocent, between empowering women and not being seen as, oh, you know, what will society think? You know, Innocent has female mentees. How do you manage that chatter in your home? How do you manage the chatter in the public domain? And how do you differentiate yourself? Because I would say that of all the men I've worked very closely with, Innocent is the only man who has treated me as an equal. And in the whole country of Nigeria, the only man who has treated me as an equal. And so why are you different? And how can we create more Innocent Chukwumas as we're parenting, as we're working through, even in our workplace, with our colleagues? What is it that inspired that in you, and how can we infuse that into our organizations?
Thank you indeed for that important question. I'll begin with the second one, which I consider easier. The first thing to say for me is actually my mother was my role model that taught me all of this. A little bit of background. So my father married the first wife, and they lived for 20 years without a kid, without kids. And then she married my mother, a 17-year-old, and mother came and had 7 children, by which time my father was already retired. So my mother was bearing the burden of home, the burden of everything, work and all of that. So I always saw her as a strong woman. So the whole idea of women being a weaker sex, I actually felt and saw my father as the weaker one. So that's where that early understanding of the important role women play. And then in my mentee life, one thing I ascribe it to is actually transparency and accountability. When I was working in CLO, my boss, Abdul Oro, said to me, there are two things within the NGO world that you will not be given benefit of doubt or presumption of innocence, which is what we all work to provide for others. And that is, if you're accused of embezzling the funds given to you, people will believe it before they hear their own story. Then the other one is sexual harassment. People will believe it before they hear your own side. So when I set out to work, I made sure, in fact, when the first office we rented as clean, because Justina and I agreed to leave where we are working to set up an organization, but we gave each other a year gap. So where I hired as an office, this was a 6-bedroom duplex. I kept 2 rooms in that place for her when she eventually started Project Alert. So I have always worked side by side with my wife. And where people who carry the stories about whether you are doing this or that to your mentee, it's your wife or they will want to go and share it with. And when you are working in the same office building with her, she will know that all those things are not through. Then the other one, as soon as I was able to afford it, my work place and home actually closed. It's only when I joined Ford that I had my family living on the mainland and myself living on the island. And within the first year, I rented a place in Ikoyi for them to join. But Josephine and the kids didn't agree to join because they didn't believe I would last 1 year in Ford without being fired. So I stayed 8 years. But after the first year of them not joining, I relocated back to Ikeja with them. So that proximity helped me a lot. And even as I'm now, I left Ford. I'm trying to start a consulting company. A lady saw my, just sent me a LinkedIn message that she would like to shadow me. I've not heard of that word. It's one of the words youngsters use these days. The first person I asked what this was, my first daughter, Chidima. Please, this person says she wants to shadow me. What does shadowing mean? She said it actually wants me to mentor her. And then I said, okay, check her. She was the one that did the background check and came back to say that she actually thought she was very entrepreneurial. And she's working with me now and actually planning what next I plan to do. So for me, the critical word is be open and let everybody around you know your relationship with the people who come to be mentored, and also have a boundary, because when the boundaries shift is where it will be difficult. And you may not know, you're also my role model in how women and how to bring up my daughters to be respected in whatever they do in life. So the admiration is mutual. So back to the first question, was how do you deal with supporting women, farmers, and in their livelihood support in an environment where patriarchy, culture, religion, and all of that are such an impediment. It's actually the main focus of the program on ending violence against women, because we look at, since Beijing 1995 World Conference on Human Rights, a lot of progress have been made in standard setting. We have rash of laws and policies supporting women. We have 1001 women's rights organizations providing assistance to women in economic justice, in political participation, and across the. But in spite of all of that, these things persist. And it came down to cultural norms. How do you shift the cultural norms, particularly the custodians of these norms who bring extreme right-wing interpretation in them that inhibit women from fully actualizing themselves. And the focus now is a twin prong: elevate the voices of change agents among them and use them to reach others who are not similarly inclined. And then also the second one, hold personally accountable to all these custodians, village heads, and all of that put these impediments on women, that if anything happens to them in relation to violence, that you would hold them personally accountable. And also link up with advocacy organizations who are working in this area. Listening to me, you will conclude that this is a protracted process, but it's always a long struggle. But the critical one, if you're able to gain one champion amongst them, maximize the use of that person, actually using wherever you're going to talk to colleagues because they are more likely to listen to him.
Thank you so much, Mr. Innocent, for that wonderful answer. And with this, we'll be rounding up today's celebration, and we thank you for your active participation. We thank in a most special way Mr. Innocent Chukwuma for agreeing to speak to us, even on a very short notice. We thank you and we appreciate you so much, sir. Thank you. And I thank each and every one of us, people from Nourishing Africa, Sahel Capital, and of course our team. Thank you so much. And in our own little way, as we heard from the presentation, may we action out these points to make the world a better place for women. Let's challenge every abnormality we see against women and try to create a more conducive place for us to showcase what God has given to us. And with that, we'll round off, close up the curtain for this year, and we look forward to a more amazing celebration next year. Thank you so much for coming around.
Thanks, and I will share the slides for those who are interested in having it.
Thank you so much, Innocence. That was wonderful. Thank you so much. Can we unmute ourselves and give a round of applause, please?
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Like Innocence.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. We're very grateful. Thank you for all the work you do for women, for your daughters, for your wife, and for all of us who have been your beneficiaries and have really been inspired by your life's example. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.